Hey everybody, you're watching We the Fandom, where we discuss comic books, pop culture, and the fandom experience. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to see more content. How's it going everybody? Jacob here at We the Fandom, and today's video is actually based off of a viewer request. I'll be talking about the obvious disparity between, I guess, what you'd call tried and true comic book fans and those who talk superheroes because it's the mainstream trend. And that'll be all based off of research I did on the 2019 comic book sales, basically trying to determine by the month-by-month comic book sales who the most popular writers are and who the most popular characters and therefore comic books were of that time period. So to kind of go back, give some little background, you get a lot of people on social media, you get very prominent pop culture websites who have very strong opinions about who the most popular characters are, what the most popular books are, and the best writers. And you'll get them doing their best to boost up those writers and characters that they really like. And so today's video is to determine who the popular writers of 2019 are based off of actual research. I'm going to get into the results of that research in a little bit, but I used one character to kind of define my point, showing that disparity. That character being Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel. There's a few reasons for that. One of them being the Captain Marvel movie came out a couple years ago with some controversy, partly due to the actress herself, and also due to the fact that the character was basically shoehorned into the MCU. I guess Marvel was thinking at the time, Wonder Woman had come out a couple of years before. Wonder Woman is an amazing movie, in my opinion, and still stands as one of the best of the DC extended universe. And I guess Marvel saw that and thought, hey, you know what? We don't really have a strong female lead character in a movie. So why don't we take this B-list hero, Carol Danvers, and we're going to give her own movie. And to make sure people watch it, we're going to sandwich it in between Infinity War and Endgame. That way people feel like they need to see it. We'll tell all the fans that she is now the strongest character in the MCU. We'll have her be the inspiration behind the Avengers team name. I know Captain America's first movie was literally called The First Avenger, but I'm sure fans will just forget that. And then I guess as a cherry on top, once we kill off Tony Stark and get rid of Captain America, we'll let all the fans know that Captain Marvel is now the face of the MCU. So, in my opinion, Marvel was obviously doing their absolute best to pander to what they viewed to be the bulk of their audience and trying to give them what they thought they wanted. Captain Marvel, or Carol Danvers, I should say, has never been a very popular character, and in my opinion, her comics don't sell very well. And to determine if I'm right and determine my point about the disparity between certain groups of fans and their opinions on comic books, we've got a handy dandy website called Comicron. Using Comicron, you can look at the sales based on issue by issue, looking at the most popular characters, comic books, writers. So we'll start with January. So at the top, we've got the Batman Who Laughs. And then you see right there, second place is Captain Marvel with 111,391 issues sold in January. And then we'll go back. We're just going to go month by month here real quick and see where her rankings are at for each month. Let's see. Captain Marvel was moved from first place, to 39th. Now, a big reason for that is you could say, well, the first issue was in second place for January. Doesn't that kind of defeat or go against the point you were making, and it doesn't, because what often will happen is characters like Captain Marvel, who have never had a huge popularity within Marvel Comics, they will constantly relaunch the series to a new number one, because a lot of people want to see the new number one, because you'll get either people who are collectors and think that issue number one will be worth something in a few years, or you'll get people who just simply want a new story and think, oh, I've got to read this new issue number one. It's going to have a new writer, new artist, new story arc. Maybe it'll be better than the last. And what often will happen is they'll read the number one, not care for it, and then you see the sales go down from 2, issue 3, issue 4. Let's go down to March. Let's see where she's at. $58. So she was Captain Marvel, first issue was second place in January, 39th, and then 58th. And these numbers are all based on sales, based on issues sold, both in stores, so direct market, as well as the digital market. We'll see, we'll go to April. My computer's slow. That's why you get the different colors in the page. Let's see here. So she is 67th. So again, move down in the ranking. Now, I forgot to mention at the very beginning of this video, the person who requested that I look at the top 50 comics of each month. So technically, she didn't make Captain Marvel's series did not make the last two rankings, as they were 58th and 69th respectively. Yeah, so this one didn't make it into the top 50. $79. So from issue 1 being in second place to issue 5 being 79th. So for sake of time, I will jump ahead to December. Okay, so issue 13, she went back to 46 with 36,600 issues sold. We'll go see what one of these other numbers are at. So again, 73. So there were some obvious fluctuations, but you can see that from issue 1, going from second place to issue 2, going to, I think it was somewhere in the late 30s, there's definitely a big disparity there. And what I was explaining before is with the less popular characters, they'll constantly relaunch the series. So there's a new number one, a new number one, and then you'll see that people will buy the number one, and then I guess they don't like it because the sales will go down drastically between number one and whatever the end of the series was, which there are fluctuations as shown by the chart. And now I will show simple spreadsheet compiling that information to tell us who the most popular writers for 2019 were based off of sales. So based off of people who actually wanted to buy these comics. So you'll see Jason Aaron at the top here. Jason Aaron has been pretty prominent in Marvel for the past 4 or 5 years. In 2019, he was writing Thor, King Thor, The Avengers, I think 1 or 2 other titles. Tom King, you'll get a lot of assorted opinions from different comic book fans about what they think of Tom King and his writing of Batman. And my only thing to say to that is he's second place. And personally, my opinion is because he wrote Batman. And no matter who you are as the writer, people are going to read Batman. Because you could say, well, I'll just wait until this writer's gone, they have a new writer, and then I'll start reading Batman again. The problem with that is the same writer could be on that character for a year, maybe a few years even, and you'll miss out on a lot of story. So even if you waited until you got to the new writer, you could be seeing a whole new landscape for, in this case, DC Comics in terms of Batman and the Bat family, like the Robins, Batwoman, Batwing. You got Nick Spencer next, who worked on Amazing Spider-Man. Donny Cates, who also had multiple series to include Venom, Absolute Carnage, Revenge of Cosmic Ghost Rider. You got Jonathan Hickman in 6th place. He was doing the whole, not rebranding necessarily, but giving his signature take on the X-Men with the House and Powers of X, working on all the current issues of X-Men, working on the first couple issues of New Mutants, and I think he had a hand in a couple of other of the X-Men related series coming out right now. So then you got Scott Snyder, who has been big in the past few years, writing Batman, Justice League, the Batman Who Laughs, writing the Dark Multiverse stories. Brian Michael Bendis, who's been a staple for both DC and Marvel for years. I think he was writing Superman. Al Ewing, writing a few stories to include the Immortal Hulk. Peter J. Tomasi, he was writing Batman for a while. I think he also had a hand in some Justice League stories. Joshua Williamson, who's writing The Flash, writing Batman, also had a hand in Justice League. Tom Taylor is writing some Batman, the Deceased story, which is really good. You should go read it. I'm not going to go over each writer and what they wrote for this year, but you can kind of get a feel for, who the popular writers were. Most of these are DC and Marvel, but you got Robert Kirkman, who's working on The Walking Dead. You've got a couple Image comics throughout here. You got Stan Lee in there in 49th place because he saw Marvel was selling the facsimile edition of Amazing Fantasy, which was the first appearance of Spider-Man. So basically a reprint of a book that came out a few decades ago, but it was high enough in sales that it made Stan Lee 49th place as writer. You got Mark Waid, who's been pretty prominent for a decade or two as 58th place. So even though I went off the top 50 books for every month, these aren't the top 50 writers. These are just all the writers based on their sales for those top 50 books for every month. So it ended up being 95 writers. So who do you trust? The title of this video is Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is. It's my opinion that you should trust the customer, finding out, do your research and find out what people actually like. Find out what the customers are reading and what the customers are willing to pay for. Now, in general, Marvel sales started to decline about when they launched the all-new, all-different Marvel initiative, which was a big marketing push to create more diversity, inclusion, representation in Marvel Comics, which is great, but they did a terrible job at it. Basically, their method was to either push aside or completely replace big fan favorite characters that have had decades of publishing material, decades of history, and replace them with characters that nobody really cared about. That didn't go over so well for Marvel. DC took a slightly different path to alienating their customer base. In 2011, they came out with the New 52, which was just a universe-wide reboot of DC Comics. Basically, they were trying to modernize DC characters and stories for, the modern day. And in my opinion, the way they changed some of the characters was almost irredeemable until they came up with DC Rebirth, which was their attempt to kind of bring back the classic version of mainstream characters. Now, Marvel also attempted to do this, but they did it in more of a Rise of Skywalker kind of way, in that they try to give both the old and new fans what they wanted. The problem is that when they brought back the classic characters that everybody wanted, they handed creative control of them over to the same writers who were pushing the agenda that pushed the fans away in the first place. So, Marvel doesn't learn too well, I don't think. Yeah, they didn't really fix anything. Now, you get a lot of fans and you get a lot of writers working for these big companies who will say things like, oh, you just don't like diversity. And the answer to that is to just laugh and go back to reading good comics. The customers will tell you what they want. To be completely honest, and I can only speak for myself, but I don't think a lot of fans care either way about diversity. I think diversity is in and of itself not a inherently good or bad thing. It's just a thing that exists. It's a part of a story, but shouldn't be the driving force behind the story. Bottom line is, you want to know what the customers and what the fans actually like, look at what they're willing to pay for. So today's video is based off of a fan request. Getting a request for a new video in my very first video was awesome, and I hope people keep it up. Making suggestions for videos really helps me out for the future and growing my YouTube channel. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.